Guys, so today we only have one presentation by Mary, and I think it's about her presentation that her research she's doing with Dr. Hartstone. So I'm gonna let her take it from here.
Hey, so I'm going to be presenting somebody else's research, but it does relate to what I'm doing with Dr. Hartstone, but it's not his paper because I didn't know what he'd shown you guys already, and I didn't want to like double up because that would be kind of boring. But I'm going to go ahead and screen share. Can everybody see that all right?
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. Put this out of the way. So I'm going to be presenting on molecular versus morphological approaches to diet analysis in the Caracal. That's one right there. That one actually lives in North Carolina. Her name is Ari. She's really cool. She has floppy ear tips, which is kind of cute. But the background for this research paper basically summarizes in two parts what a caracal is and why they're interesting, and what molecular versus morphological diet analysis is and why that's of interest. So a caracal is a medium-sized felid. They prey on small to medium-sized mammals, mice, rats, rabbits, that kind of thing. They also eat some birds and fish, lizards, things like that if they can catch them, but that's not really their primary diet source. This particular study was based in Iran because their habitat is decreasing there due to human interference. And we don't have a lot of knowledge about their ecology in general, but like specifically if their habitat's decreasing, we want to see if there's any way we can mitigate that because they're not endangered yet. But it's easier to do research before they're endangered and then fix it when they become endangered than wait till they're endangered and try to figure it out, kind of too little too late sort of thing. So I included this video because a fun fact about caracals, their ear tufts are pretty unique. They can use them for communication. They might increase their hearing to some extent. And they're also good for camouflage. They kind of break up the outline of their head in tall grass. They have more than 20 muscles that connect to their ears that let them do that ear flip thing that I had in that video, which is why I included that. I thought it was cool. The other thing they're looking at is diet analysis. So morphological methods are limited to identifiable items. This particular study is based on stat analysis, but they also can do like stomach content analysis if you have a dead caracal. But it's based on like looking at what's in the feces or in the stomach contents and trying to find like bones or hair. The disadvantage of that being that if you can't tell species apart, you kind of have to generalize. It's like, oh, it's a brown, kind of rat sort of material, but you don't know what species or anything like that. Molecular methods are more expensive and specialized. They let you tell species apart, but there's never been a lot of studies comparing the two methods directly, so that was kind of encapsulated with the caracal research in this study. So what they did was they went to the wildlife refuge in central Iran from 2002 to 2006. It's this huge wildlife refuge, and they were looking for caracal dens to collect feces from because they didn't want to risk like mixing up samples of caracals with other animals because there's so many animals that live in a wildlife refuge. So just to be sure, they got them from dens. They obtained 22 scat samples over the course of those 4 years. They collected them with gloves. They sent ecologists in to make sure not to disturb the den, stuff like that. So what they did for the morphological analysis is you rinse kind of the feces through several sieves, and what you get at the end is just kind of like the undigested material that made it through the digestive system. And they also did a 307 base pair fragment amplification and like analyzed the DNA in those samples to see if they could find anything like with DNA that didn't show up in the morphological analysis. Basically what they found, so this picture here is some of the materials they found in the feces. That picture right there in the middle is like porcupine quills, or hedgehog quills rather. So obviously that caracal ate a hedgehog at some point. But some of these fragments, like across the bottom, like there's a couple teeth, but you can't really tell what kind of teeth they are or what species, aside from probably a rodent. But overall, 76% of the diet was rodent species, and 86% of what they were able to find in the feces was identifiable morphologically. The rest they were able to determine molecularly what it was. So they found 6 rodents, 1 hare, 1 hedgehog, and 1 goat species among the 22 samples. I've got some pictures here of some of the animals that they were able to identify genetically in the feces. So they've got a Jared, a jerboa, and a hare. I just thought they were really cute, so I figured I would throw those on there. Overall, they found that the morphological molecular analyses were generally in agreement. They didn't find anything like contradictory, but they do think that DNA approach is a valuable complement to morphological methods because it's so much more specific and you get a lot more information from the DNA analysis. Although they did point out that because it was only 22 samples, it's not a good idea to like try to characterize the region or the diet of caracals based on this one study. A lot of other studies are available on caracal diet that indicate that they eat a lot of livestock, like they take people's sheep and goats, gazelles, depending on where the caracals are located. And they didn't find more than 1 species of goat in these samples, so it wasn't, a perfect study. But I have the citation here. It was done in 2019. That's all I've got for that one.
So I have a question.
Mhm.
So you were talking about like it attacks livestock and like they found like goat stuff in its stomach. So does it like attack them and like, or is it like a scavenger
They've done a couple studies. They're not. I would say livestock's not like their primary source of food. Like I said, 76% of the diet was rodents. But they do go out and kill. They don't scavenge. They prefer fresh meat.
and do they like hunt in like collectively or is it like an individual thing?
They are solitary.
Oh wow. No, because they look so
Yeah.
small. So I'm like,
Yeah, they're not much bigger than a regular house cat, which is what makes them kind of neat because most other cats their size like exclusively birds and rodents and things like that.
yeah, that's pretty impressive.
So that ear flip thing,
Yeah.
awesome. Why do they do that again?
Um, Everyone's kind of in disagreement about what the ear tufts are for. They're in part for communication, like with other caracals. They're partially for camouflage because it kind of like makes it a more fuzzy outline in the grass, if you want to put it that way. And then part of it is supposedly improves their hearing, so they can hear because they hunt rodents, like if they're underground.
I see. And how does it communicate? Like, what does that entail?
I wish I could tell you. Like I said, there's very limited information on caracal ecology, so like we're pretty sure it's probably for communication, but that's about the extent of that research.
And they're in North Carolina.
They are not. Oh well, not natively. There's one. Over the summer, I worked at the Carolina Tiger Rescue. That's how I met Heartstone Rose, and they have 2 caracals there. And I thought it would be fun to include a picture of one that's like an hour from here.
That's awesome.
You said the caracals are mostly solitary. What is a caracal den then, if they're primarily solitary?
When they have kittens, they have a den
Okay.
that they build.
Was this the only study done like this, or were there like other studies too?
In terms of comparing like diet analysis or caracal data?
Yeah, comparing their diets.
Yeah, there's I've been looking for a while at caracal diet studies. There's not a whole lot available. And it's like they're always very particular. I found one that was based in Africa, specifically not in a wildlife reserve because they were looking at the impacts that caracals have on farmers and like the livestock that they eat, which is how we know they eat livestock because we've done research on caracals that don't live in nature reserves. But overall, there's not a lot of information about caracals available.
Are they carnivores or are they omnivores?
The study found that they had eaten like a couple of sticks and like a little bit of plant matter, but the general consensus is that they are carnivores and they do mostly eat meat. They either eat plants from like, if you eat a mouse that has grass in it, then you've also eaten the grass. Or if you're eating outside, sometimes leaves just get stuck to the meat and they'll eat that.
Gotcha.
What sparked your interest in this research?
I think caracals are really cute. They're very dangerous and they shouldn't be in people's houses. And I feel like, personally, I always want to say that because people do keep them in their house. And then when it gets out, that's like a huge public safety issue. But beside the point, I do think they're really cute. And I think it's really interesting that they eat such large prey considering they're about the same size as like my cat in my house. And she doesn't even kill bugs. So like, how does a caracal kill a whole boat?
Would they attack humans and like eat them or try to eat them?
Probably not with most. So when you're looking at cats, there's big cats and small cats, and that's Panthera are the big cats like lions and tigers, and felids are the small cats like caracals, and house cats and bobcats and all of those. But small cats are generally inclined to flight in a fight or flight response. So if you were to walk up to a caracal, it would probably run from you rather than attack you. And the chances of it being hungry enough to try to eat you are pretty low, but not impossible, I guess. It's probably very afraid and would run from you.
I
So-
know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sam.
I know you said there was one here that you got to actually like work with, but where are they most abundant? Like I know you talked about that a little bit, but where are they most abundant? Like what kind of environments?
They're mostly abundant in like forest type environments, to put it simply. They're like all over Africa, and like I said, this study was done in Iran, so they're pretty widespread. They're not endangered. It's just certain populations are, which is why Iran was a particular interest.
Thank you.
So I know you said like you shouldn't have them at home and stuff, but you said yourself like they look a lot like house cats. So have there been any attempts to like domesticate them?
I will say domestication is a tricky word. Most of the time when people say domestication, they mean tame, because domestication would imply, I hope I'm not like explaining something you all already know. Domestication is like specifically bringing them inside and breeding like the two nicest caracals together and the two nicest caracals together for generations and generations until you don't have like a true caracal anymore. Whereas taming is something you do with an individual animal. Like if I bring one caracal in as a kitten and I'm like really, really nice to it, that would imply like I'm trying to tame it and make it nicer. But genetically, it's still really mean. Like it would still have really mean kittens.
Mm-hmm.
But yes and no would be my answer, because people who sell caracals as pets, which is illegal in some states but not others, they're breeding caracals together, sometimes with house cats and sometimes with other caracals, to try to create like a nicer caracal or like a nicer looking caracal. So there are efforts to domesticate them as like a trade, but not as like a scientific endeavor or like a very successful one, in my opinion.
Okay.
How close did you get to the caracal that you worked with an hour away from here?
Yeah, when I worked at Carolina Tiger Rescue, I was an intern, so I was in charge of feeding them. So within a couple feet, but they have safety fence. I never touch them. I will never touch them unless it's dead or asleep. But I mean,
Do you
close
think
enough. I
it
thought
would
it was
bite you?
cool.
Is that why you would never touch it?
Why?
Do you think it would bite you? Is that why you would
100%.
never touch it?
Yeah, it's not, in my opinion, it's not safe to interact with wild animals like that. I don't want to get bitten. I don't want it to rip my arm open. It can stay on the other side of the fence.
Gotcha.
You said that the caracals were at the tiger rescue. How do they compare to tigers? Like, I guess just intimidation wise, because I obviously wouldn't want to get near either wild animal, but tigers are huge, right, in comparison
Tigers
to
are really
caracals.
big. I mean, it's kind of fun when you're working with animals like that because they all have personality. You know, they're not like a monolith, to put it that way. The caracals are really cool because they always come up to you for when they know you have food, whereas the tigers sometimes have to be persuaded, which is kind of silly to me because the caracals are supposed to be afraid of you and the tigers are supposed to not be afraid of you. But I think tigers just like to be a pain in the butt about it. But caracals are cool because the ones that we had were always really interested in scent enrichment. So we have the enclosures that they're in are really, really big. And so they're cut in half with a fence with a shift gate. And so you move them to one side and then you can go in and like clean up and stuff and leave something behind that they'll think is exciting. So that they'll go to what's exciting and then you can close the gate and clean the other side. But the caracals there were always really excited about anything scented, anything perfumed, cinnamon. They really love it. Whereas tigers are usually more interested in like food-based enrichment. Like we would make blood popsicles and they were always crazy about that.
You said blood
That's just like
popsicles?
yeah. Well, because at Carolina Tiger Rescue they're fed a whole carcass diet, which means like if you went to the grocery store and got like a turkey for Thanksgiving or a chicken for Thanksgiving, we'd feed them depending on how much food they need to eat, like portions or whole turkey or chicken. And then sometimes people would donate animals, like whole animals. Like once or twice we picked up a deer carcass from the side of the road. And so you use that blood and you freeze it and the tigers get popsicles out of it, which they really enjoy. And you look really freaked out. I swear it's not that gross.
Bro, that's different. Dang, bro. The next vampire convention finna be over there.
In a similar thing to like people having caracals as pets in Florida, don't people have like alligators as pets? And then when they turn like 4 or 5, they like throw them in the wild. Like they just release them.
Yeah, that's probably true. Fun fact about Florida, at one point they tried to make it illegal to have wild cats as pets. But the lawmakers couldn't decide what terminology to use, or they were just misinformed. And so they banned all animals under the order Panthera, but that still leaves it totally legal to own like a cougar, which is also a mountain lion, and also a puma. They're all the same. Like you could have a cougar in your house or a caracal like this or whatever, because they were trying to ban like wildcats and they just said Panthera, and that was only about half of all the wildcats in possession in private ownership. Goofy, if you ask me.
Wait, so how like wild does a cat have? Like what makes it a caracal? Like how wild does a cat have to be, or is it like a specific type of species?
I don't understand your question. I'm really sorry.
Like, is a caracal a term for like a wild cat, or is it like a specific type of species?
Oh, yeah, a caracal is a specific type of cat. That's the scientific name for a caracal.
Domesticated. Like, can you not domesticate a wild cat?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Wildcat is just a cat in the wild.
Well, there is such thing as like a wildcat, which is like a certain species.
Yes, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But it's not like a wildcat versus like a wild cat. It's just a caracal. And the reason you can't domesticate them is because you'd have to have wild caracals in your house and breed them for generations before you got a domesticated caracal. So like for that whole however many years it takes, you're keeping wild animals in your house. Which I mean it's a huge point of contention, especially like I don't know how many of you guys are like in animal science or in cows, but like whether or not you should be allowed to keep those animals in your house is a question of like your personal liberty to own it versus like the danger it poses to your neighbors. Yeah, Jennifer, they're not petable at all, I promise. But they are pretty cute.
Do you know the legal laws in about owning those kind of animals in North Carolina?
Yeah, pretty much. It's pretty much legal in North Carolina to own anything that's not native. So you can own a lion, you can own a tiger, you can own a caracal. You cannot own a raccoon. Can't have possums, can't have squirrels. Tigers, yes. There's very little regulation as to, like, you don't have to have a vet for it. You don't have to prove anything. The only challenge is acquiring it, which, like, federally, you can't bring them across state lines or from out of the country. And there's certain laws, loopholes in the laws where, like, if your grandpa owned it and then he bred one and then gave it to you, like, that's fine. There's a lot of loopholes, but overall, I think they're very lax.
What major are you?
Animal science.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I realized I didn't like introduce myself at the start. I'm a third-year senior in animal science. I'm about to graduate in the spring. It's super exciting. And hopefully I'm going to go into zoology and work with these exotic animals all the time.
Wait, so are you planning on going to like graduate school?
Probably vet school.
Oh, okay, got you.
Awesome.
NC States?
Ideally.
Do you have any experience with like wolves and stuff like that, or do you mainly stick to cats?
I don't have much experience with wolves. Wolves and bears are like the one hole in my experience, I feel like.
What kind of other animals did they have at the place you were working this summer?
They had lions, tigers, leopards, kinkajous and coatimundis, which are carnivores but not cats. They're kind of lemur-like. They're technically raccoon-like, but I think they look more like a lemur. Bobcats. They had cougars, which a cougar is also a puma, is also a mountain lion, is also a catamount. They're all the same thing. There's just so many names. Trying to think. I think I missed a couple. Servals. They had like a dozen servals, which are really cool. They're like if you took a regular cat and like stretched its legs out, and you got a serval. They have the largest ear to head ratio. SERVAL, serval. They have the largest ear to head ratio of any feline. They're super fun to work with, but a little scary. Definitely the meanest cat, I think.
Okay, that was a really good presentation, very different from something that we've had before. And I hope that inspires some of you guys to sign up and present for October 20th. I know it's after exams, most likely, because most exams are next week. So hopefully everyone can get in and have a chance to present. And there's October 20th and November 5th. And so those are the last 2 dates for this semester. So we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you guys.